United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Dr. Fike?
Here. I'm not here. We'll just come up
Mr.
to-
Friend?
Here.
Mrs. Geyer?
Here.
Mr. Lizza?
Here.
Mrs. O'Rear?
Here.
Mr. Polakowski? Mr. Shipley?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Here. Mr. Polakowski did ask to be excused this evening. We were in executive session prior to this meeting for some personnel matters. And I do have a brief announcement pertaining to last month's meeting. Following the December 22nd, 2022 special voting meeting, it was brought to my attention that there was some confusion in regards to the item number 2 under personnel, employee resolution. At that point, Dr. Fike wanted to change her vote to no. Her votes could not legally be changed at that time because the meeting had already been adjourned and there was not another meeting advertised until this evening. Although we are not able to change her vote to no, I would like the minutes to reflect that she would have voted no.
Thank you.
Are there any citizens' comments?
No.
I do not have any. Okay, on to minutes.
Yes. Meeting minutes from December 7th, 2022 reorganization meeting, and meeting minutes from December 22nd, 2022 special voting meeting. Is there any discussion or concerns? The only concern I have is just that if we could please put a reflection in there
Yes.
for that vote.
Okay, reports?
Superintendent's information.
Okay, I have two things, well, really three things to report. First of all, I wanted to kind of give a thank you to the teaching staff and the administrative staff for working hard on the curriculum overviews for every single course that we teach here in the district. I want to say close to 80% of them are now posted on our website, and we are finalizing the last 20% with some minor details we're cleaning up. The big thing was we wanted to make sure they all looked the same, they all felt the same, and provided a good overview of what each and every one of our courses are about. So kudos to everybody for getting those done, and thank you. Second of all, we are currently starting our special education plan. Every 3 years we are tasked with the creation and revision of a special education plan that is part of our comprehensive plan, and it's always out in the forefront before a comprehensive plan. So the special education plan will get done and submitted first, and that means next year we're going to have to embark upon the process of redoing our comprehensive plan to submit to PDE. So there is going to be a committee of special education teachers, regular education teachers, administrators, parents, and board members in order to take a look at this special education plan. We plan on meeting 3 separate dates after school with the intent on having this plan prepared and ready for your review in March, because it needs to be posted for a period of time before we can go ahead and approve it and send to PDE. And last but not least, it is School Director Recognition Month. So as we go through some reports, I have certificates for each and every one of you. So I want to personally thank you all, because I know it's probably the best paying job you have. But honestly, thank you for what you do, and I know it's not easy giving up your time and your nights, especially through the times you went through COVID and everything that you dealt with in that regard. So I want to thank you all, and I'll be handing out certificates at the end of the night. That's all I have.
Solicitor information.
Thank you. I have no specific legal issues to raise tonight during the discussion meeting, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Business Manager, Transportation Director information.
Thank you. I have a few items to bring to everyone's attention. This week I have been working diligently with Deloitte on the federal SR2 audit. There are maybe 3 or 4 items that I have to finish up, and that should be done, hopefully. I can also tell you that I held a meeting with Mark Scheller and regarding the primary center roof, and Mr. Delacour as well. The final payment will be issued for $138,199, which will pay off the final project. The RTUs have been received. However, after talking with Mr. Shaler and Mr. Trader and Dr. Boone, you'll be seeing a change order hopefully next board meeting for an additional amount in which to store the RTUs, because we felt it wasn't advantageous or safe while the children are in the buildings to get the RTUs delivered onto the roofs, and started that project. PSERS, I'm very happy to say, for the 23-24 fiscal year, the contribution rate went down. Not much, but it went down. This is the first time since the 08-09 fiscal year that the PSERS rate has went down. This year's PSERS rate is 35.26%. Next year's PSERS rate is 34%. I'll take it. I was very happy to see that.
It stays the same.
And obviously, we're still working on the budget, have probably about 95% of that done, and soon I'll be getting in touch with Mrs. Williams and getting a finance committee meeting set up. That's it.
Thank you. CWCTC report.
Yeah, so we had the dinner last month, the reorganization dinner last month, where the culinary students made all the food for everything. We had the students there. There is a open house in February. I believe it's February 18th. I think it's a Wednesday. I'll have to double check that. Anyone can go and see what they do there. They can tour. I know that our high school students are going at the end of the month. Mr. Kravchuk, is that correct? Yeah. I'm sorry? 25th. 25th, our freshmen are going to tour. So they've been doing a lot of stuff. The culinary students baked tons of cookies and danishes for the police officer that just passed and donated them to that. And a lot of work has been done here by CWCTC students. We've seen some pictures, and I'm sure we can maybe put some on Facebook or somewhere. There have been some on Facebook. So they've been keeping busy. They're hoping to keep increasing enrollment because there's more and more students who are interested in it. So they're doing great.
Thank you. WIU report.
The IU does not meet in December, and the IU does not meet in July. We will have our next meeting in January, and I'll give a report then.
Thank you. PSBA liaison report.
I have no report at this time.
PSBA legislative report.
We had a COLA meeting the first week of December, and we are still working on the same types of things. We are working on creating committees for specific representatives. So obviously I'm on for Representative DeVanzo, and I think Dr. Boone's on for Stefano. So the goal is to have a meet and greet with each of them, the people that are on the committee. So other members on my committee would be people from York and Bell Vernon, because he covers that area as well. So we are working on creating a pamphlet that gives statistics from all three of our schools that kind of says this is what we do, this is our area, our demographics, this is what we're looking to find, or these are the things that we need, and then we could each have talking points of specifically something about our school. So hopefully in the next couple months we'll have a meeting with him.
Okay, committee reports. Buildings, Ground, and Safety. Mr. Polakowski is not here. We have not met, but I believe we do need to get a meeting scheduled in the next month or so. Finance District Operations and Transportation. That is my committee, and Mrs. Mondock just said we will be meeting soon on the budget. Personnel Policy Academics is Mrs. Smith, and I know that she has had a meeting.
We have had a meeting. I feel like all I'm doing is talking tonight. We had a meeting
Good job.
last week, and we specifically spoke about Policy 707, our favorite one, at length, and that is something that we are hoping to have on the agenda for February, and then vote in, or March, and then vote in April.
Yeah.
And the terms of that would go into effect July 1st then. It would give enough people time to figure out what's going on. We had very lengthy discussions with administrators, with Dr. Boone, with other board members about money that we're losing. We don't want to make money on anybody, and we don't even want to break even, but we don't want to lose as much. So that's kind of what we're looking at. With the price of everything under the sun increasing, we kind of have to increase our things a little bit too. So we also looked at handbooks, reviewed some of the things in those. Is there anything else?
No?
Stephanie, do you have anything?
No, just the new overview of programs of studies.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new courses.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Non-academic, athletic, and extracurricular.
Nothing at this time. We have a meeting in a couple weeks scheduled so next month we'll have something to report.
Mr. Lizza had reached out to me and asked to be added to this committee, so I'll be adding him to that as well. And then, of course, if there's anybody else, we've left that as 3 people so that there would be a spot that if the president of the board wished to come to those meetings, I could. But at this point, I will forego that, and Mr. Lizza can attend those.
Yes.
Student reports. We do not have either student here this evening.
No, they don't have anything. School just got back last week.
Okay.
Okay, next, personnel. No, I'm sorry, policies.
Final approval of policy 201, admission of students. Is there any discussion on this item?
It was settled on September 1st, correct?
Correct.
Any other discussion? Okay.
Personnel.
Okay, so under personnel, I have several items. Personnel log for 1/12/2023. Dr. Boone is going to put that up on the screen so everybody can see that. High school boys varsity soccer coach, FMLA for employee number 2065, FMLA for employee number 2306, and the 2022-2023 musical staff and wages. That might be an addition from the agenda that the board took a look at over the weekend. Or is there any comments, concerns, discussion on any of those personnel items? Okay.
Okay. Next section is education.
Okay. So under education, we have 9 items. Approval of new courses. Item number 2, SHS Program of Studies 2023-2024. Item number 3, SMS Program of Studies 2023-2024. Item number 4, SPC SES Program of Studies 2023-2024. Item number 5, approval of 23-24 school calendar. Item number 6, additional ESSERS 3 purchase, SES Computer Lab, and SHS STEM Labs. Item number 7, IU1 Educational Service Agreement for 2022-2023. Item number 8, Student Discipline Agreement for Student 2022-2023, number 102. And number 9, Student Discipline Agreement for Student 2022-2023, number 103. I will entertain any discussion, comments, questions on items 1 through 9 under education.
I do have a question. When we were talking about the STEM labs for the, I was thinking that would be under what we had agreed upon for the library, like doing that whole media room.
I think it's what he's requesting is different.
Isn't that for a classroom for
the
students to teach?
So the SHS STEM labs are in specifically in the classrooms for robotic engineering and graphics. So the computers that are in the STEM labs right now, I don't know if you remember, there was a citizen's comment, I want to say 2 months ago, regarding the keyboards on the laptops being broken. There are keys off of them. I've been down in that room a couple times to take a look at those keyboards and the laptops, and they are in pretty bad condition. They are running Windows 7, which is basically dead at this point. Wow. There are when I talk to students who are in those classes and programs, there are students who would like to go to robotic engineering in post-secondary and are refusing to take our classes because the software and the hardware we have isn't conducive to learning that content. So specifically, it runs 2D modeling in the robotics labs, and it doesn't do any 3D modeling at all. So we're not really preparing our kids for what they need post-secondary in those classrooms.
Okay.
We looked at both a desktop solution and a laptop solution. The way the labs are set up down there is more conducive to a laptop. That way they have two spaces. That way they can work in one area and take it over to where they actually build the robots and program them there. So the laptops are a better solution at the high school.
Is this something we would need, like, say, one per student, or is this something that could be like one laptop per three?
So there's two. So right, I mentioned the robotic engineering lab and I mentioned the graphics lab. So the graphics lab, there's only, I want to say, 7 stations, maybe 8.
Okay.
7 or 8 stations, because those kids can all share and they work on projects together. Now the robotic engineering one is a one-to-one kind of a program where they will all need their own separate device.
Okay.
Okay.
Those
A number
would
of
stay in the
questions.
classroom.
Yes, correct. They stay in the classroom too. Yeah.
I have a number of questions, and I'll just start from the beginning because I read it all. On your report, your weekly report, it says here, the only school that has any curriculum overviews remaining to be submitted and completed is the high school. We're continuing to work with Mr. Krofchek, but I got one.
So the curriculum overviews and the program studies are different. So the curriculum overviews essentially were the outline of what's happening in those courses. So for instance, if I was looking at Algebra 1, it would have a description of what the course is, kind of a paragraph of what the students are going to learn, and then it breaks it down into the specific modules that are occurring in that course. You go from linear equations and so forth.
What we got were programs.
What you got were program of studies, right?
Okay.
That's essentially a listing of the courses that we offer.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep.
But I have 2 concerns about the first list of items. Both 722, agricultural science, and 730 are taught at the Votech School. And I wanted to know why we're duplicating those classes.
You're speaking to new courses, correct?
Well, that's what it says.
Just so I understand, okay.
My question is, why would we duplicate what our students can already get?
And we did talk about this in the committee, correct? Mm-hmm. Mr. Krofchek, I don't want to throw you on the spot, but I know that you had more of a conversation with the teachers about this being an exploratory elective course to get kids interested in to what would happen at the CTC instead of the more in-depth learning that they're getting at the CTC.
So are they offered at 9th grade?
The question was, are they offering the ag science course in 9th grade as an elective?
But that doesn't go with what you just said, because you said it would be introductory to what the kids could get at the VOTEC. And I know the VOTEC programs are very extensive. Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought most of our kids went to VOTEC in 10th grade. Is that right or wrong?
That's correct.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
All of our kids.
Okay.
don't.
So if you were to give an 11th grader this robotics engineering, that would not work for them to go to the VOTEC. That VOTEC is not a one-year program. It's very intensive. I believe it's a certification program. Am I right?
They all are, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not getting this. I'm not getting why we are duplicating this.
Didn't we offer courses for the students that don't go to CTC though, also?
That would work, but why would you? Why would you?
Maybe you have a general interest. You just want to take it as an elective. You need a class to fill.
You know, I sit here and I look at these achievement test scores, and I think we have so many areas of need. I can't understand why duplicating subjects is something we should be doing instead of focusing on areas of need. I'm not opposed to this. I'm just saying this is duplication. Agricultural science, they have an extensive horticulture.
If that's if your goal is still to go to college, and maybe you're unsure of what your program of studies would be in college, that's able to broaden your horizons here. I think there should be some electives here.
Like a well-rounded education.
Yes.
I think it's really exciting that we're able to add some things for our students rather than constantly just be taking things away from them and giving them less options. I think it's exciting that these teachers have come forward with these new courses to offer.
So I did ask the question in our committee meeting because I had some of the same questions, but I also had a question of, are there electives that we currently have that kids can't get into? So would it be more beneficial to open up another class of that instead of creating something new? Because I'm not familiar enough with the electives of what goes on in the schools to know, okay, music theory, or I'm not even going to do music theory because that's AP, whatever elective, is super popular. Art 3 is super popular, and we have 150 kids sign up for it, and we can only take 40. So that's kind of the questions I had, are there classes like that? And and through the conversation, we basically were told it's pretty much good, right?
Well, we've made adjustments in taking classes. Like, probably the most popular class is requested is Art 1, which is currently a 6-day full credit class. So we've worked with Mrs. Goodman to get more kids into the course and to have more opportunities. If we create that as a 3-day course, now we have more opportunity to get more kids in. Graphics is another example of that, 6-day to 3-day.
If you were to guess, how many kids would want to take robotics versus art? How many will sign up for robotics versus art? Yeah, and how many in robotics? Maybe. Yeah.
So the kids who are going to CTC are not going to take this class because you can't take electives if you go. So this is for kids who aren't going to CTC, which is also good because robotics is what's happening right now. So I totally understand that. To the other side of being really popular, we have a lot of kids that are put into electives that don't want to be in that elective because there's nothing else. So I think offering some more classes might help solve that problem as well, because there's nothing to offset gym, so they're all put in a class that they might not necessarily
Or study hall,
be interested in at all.
Right, and offering a 3-day version of a course could stop a kid from having to be in a study hall for 3 days.
Right.
They could be exploring something that they haven't seen before.
Did home ec ever come up in discussion?
Yes.
What was the idea of that? No?
We don't have a home ec teacher right now. We don't have someone who, I was told we don't have anyone that has the credentials to teach home ec right now. So we would have to hire a teacher.
And we've also repurposed that area in the high school for offices, right? So it's not even in existence anymore. These were
because it's not in existence. I mean, home ec is still in existence in real life.
Oh, no, I understand that, but they've repurposed that into offices at the high school, right? That room where that was is all offices now. So there's not even a space. But these were brought up by teachers, right? That's what you told us, that our teachers came up with these. It wasn't like Mr. Kravchuk was like, I think this year we're going to have this extra class.
No, I'm just asking if it possibly came up to, because I think it's something that has been in dire need since it was gotten rid of.
Yeah, no, I agree. And through the conversation with the committee, I also asked, or someone did, I don't even remember, what constitutes enough students to be a class? Because if there's not enough kids that are signed up for this class, then, well, any class in the course, they're not going to have that class. So it's
except
possible.
For the advanced placements, like if you have physics or chemistry or calculus or something.
That's a different story. But electives, if enough kids don't sign up, they're not going to.
Not have it.
So maybe they would look at something else. So I'm in support of it. Like I said, we did discuss a lot. Sorry.
It's okay. On page 27 of the Program of Studies for the high school, it states here, the following exists to meet the statewide graduation requirements. These are options, I guess. I don't know what that means. But under the Keystone Proficiency Pathway, the one I circled is Algebra 1. Since 2016, we've had a 93% drop in achievement levels in Algebra 1, and according to the document that I have, it says that 2% of our students at the high school qualified to be proficient in algebra. So if we're going to look at a requirement that you have to pass Algebra 1, and at this time I would go back to the middle school, next to the last page. It says the same thing. Down at the bottom, it says students who are taking Algebra 1 will also take the Algebra 1 Keystone exam, an end-of-course assessment that is a requirement for high school graduation component of the Act 158 graduation pathways. I'm concerned that right now we're at 2%. If we want kids to pass that test, we have a long way to go. I'm just looking at the data that you gave us. Right now, 2% of our kids are proficient. It's a requirement for graduation. What's the plan? Because if you never pass that Algebra 1 test, that means you're not going to graduate?
Well, so the old state legislation was you had to pass all three, period. That is your only chance. You had to pass all three or graduate with IEP goals. What the state has done is said, okay, we're going to have 5 pathways now that schools can graduate students through. One of which being pass all 3 keystones, one of which having a composite score between all 3 of those high enough to make sure that you can go ahead and graduate, one being a CTC completer, one being an alternative assessment pathway, so if you have high enough scores on your SATs, PSATs, ASVAB, stuff like that, and then one with an evidence-based portfolio, which has a bunch of different factors that go into it. When you reference those numbers with the middle school and high school, the 2%,
That's just the high school.
Right. The 2% is just of the kids who took Algebra 1 in high school, 2% of that passed.
Right.
So we have if you look at the cohort of kids, let's use our current 12th graders as an example. There was a set of them who took Algebra 1 in middle school, and the majority of those kids passed it when they took it in middle school at that point. This graduating class. So now they've moved on, and they've already checked that box for graduation for them. So the remaining kids who have not taken Algebra 1 yet or passed it, then had to take it in high school and learn it and take it. And by and large, the data is what the data is. They by and large didn't pass it. So those are students that will need to graduate. They can either retake the Algebra 1 test again, or they would need to graduate based upon a composite score or one of the other 3 pathways.
Okay, because I didn't see an algebra test proficiency for grade 8.
In the middle school?
Yeah, I'm looking, but
Jason, when was that, I'm sorry, Dr. Boone, when was that presentation on those rates? Do you remember what meeting you?
That was December 7th.
I thought so, I didn't.
But under that Keystone Composite pathway, they cite Algebra 1 again.
Yeah.
It's required. My concern,
Your concern is what are we doing for Algebra 1?
it's a 93% drop since 2016. The average drop was 8.5%, and we're at 93% for that year. And it just worries me that if we don't have the appropriate algebra instruction, how does that affect graduation for a kid? I guess they have to back off then to those other ones where they just leave and don't have algebra, huh? Is that what they do then?
Well, to me, Algebra 1 proficiency is the foundation of all your upper mathematics.
That's
so
why I'm
if you don't
saying
get it in Algebra 1, you're going to really, really struggle in the rest of them.
That's why I'm saying that. And you sent out these papers, and Jason, they were absolutely beautiful, but it says action plan for improvement. They're all vacant. There's no action plan.
Those data sheets I gave you were given to the principals as a means to work with their Algebra 1 teachers, and they come up with a plan on what they're going to do. Now, in February and March, the principals will be presenting their data based upon what I gave them and what you've already seen already. So they're going to be speaking to what they've done so far this year to kind of attack some of those deficits.
How many algebra teachers do we have at the high school?
I want to say 2, but it's probably only 1. Is that correct? 2? Okay.
2. I don't think that's sufficient.
I think that some work needs to be done too, coordinating. It would be important to coordinate between the high school and the middle school to ensure that the rigor is there in the middle school that's preparing the students for this test and also for the math that they're going to take at the high
You're
school.
saying that the proficiency test that they take in middle school will count for graduation?
Correct,
Yeah,
yes.
that's okay. I'm not comfortable with this. Everybody on the school board has an agenda, and this is mine, achievement. When I see a 2%, I think this problem is so serious that we need to address it with increased educational emphasis, whatever that's going to take, rather than duplicate an agriculture program or even robotics.
So
if you want
what
that.
do you suggest
I'd rather
we do?
see algebra, more kids eligible for algebra, or do you have any ESSERS teachers in the high school?
We do not.
To use one of them for algebra.
We had one, but they ended up.
Okay, see, and I mentioned this before. We have we're spending all kinds of ESSERS money, and I'm not seeing it going to teaching, but that's just my impression. But I am concerned, 2 years ago, I asked for, and I'm going to ask for it again, and everybody should get it, and I know I've been told if it comes from me, it's no good, but I got a list of all high school teachers and their classes and their schedules. Now, this was 2 years ago, but there were 139 teachers at the high school 2 years ago. There are 8 periods in a high
There's
school.
139 total teachers in the district. 132, I think, total in our district.
Well, this was several years ago. Could this be
Not
different?
139 teachers.
139 would have been total teachers.
How many teachers are at the high school?
Okay.
38.
38. Okay, I had the one wrong. 38. I did not brag up my schedules. I'm just using this. But there's an 8-period day, and everybody gets a period off, so there's 7 periods. So I went through that, and I spent probably the better part of a week looking at it to see how many teachers were teaching a full 7-day schedule. And I saw how many were teaching 6 periods a day, and how many were teaching 5 periods a day or less. And it was bad. It was real bad. And again, I'm asking for that list of those teachers. I didn't count special ed. I didn't count special ed teachers. It was, they have a special category. They do different things. Their schedules are different. But I would like to have a list of the high school teachers, just their schedules. Don't even give me their names if you don't want to. And see who's teaching 7 periods, who's teaching 6 periods, 5 periods. So there was one teacher who taught 4 periods, and I remember that clearly. And somebody said to me, well, what were they doing? There were things like office duty, hall duty, study halls, different things like that. And I'm just concerned. I'm really worried about the high school scores, because when I was on the board before, we didn't pass the state norm of 70% for, I think, 4 years in a row or 5 years in a row. And I just think we ought to address the academic concerns at the high school. That concerns me a lot. And it might be an issue of looking at where are our priorities in terms of what we're doing for scheduling for these kids.
So I have a question, Mr. Krofcheck. You said there are 2 algebra teachers at the high school, and we're specifically talking about Algebra 1 right now. So how many students at the high school are taking Algebra 1 versus how many students in middle school are taking Algebra 1?
This is ninth grade, a lot bigger. Usually it's around 60-70% take algebra in 8th grade. So algebra is not a high school class, it's a middle school class. So what we're getting in high school is kids that weren't successful in middle school. So I know for years we tried to keep it around 60%, 70%. I think at its peak, we had 8 out of 10 took algebra in 8th grade.
Okay, well, how many kids take algebra in high school? How many?
Doesn't go into records, right? Just the high school records.
I think this is more a middle school conversation for Algebra 1, too, because what percentage do you think is acceptable, Dr. Fike? As a
I'm dwelling on this. If we have 30 or 40 kids and only 2% of those 30 or 40 kids were...
But you only have 47% passing coming out of the middle school, which is not a really high number either.
What's that number?
47.5% are passing in middle school. So I think that I had heard that 11 kids passed last year that took it
In the middle school.
in the 8th grade last year who are current freshmen.
Then we should have more kids taking Algebra 1 at the high school.
But they don't necessarily repeat Algebra 1 if they do not pass the keystones. And then
It's a requirement.
They don't know their test score until the next school year.
Right, and it's not really a requirement. There are ways around it. So if you're not an algebra person, you're going to use a different pathway.
Jason, I have a question that I've been mulling over in my mind. When you look at grade distribution sheets, okay, at the high school algebra, did everybody get an F? Because that's what it looks like on here.
I can't say that I've seen that. So
Okay,
I can't.
so if you-
I would guess that no, not everybody got an F.
Okay, but if you had some kids making A's and B's, how do you account for a 2% proficiency? I want the grade distribution to equal the.
But that would be hard to do.
My guesstimate would be
You can opt out
because
of these tests.
Yeah.
for religious reasons.
Okay, but during COVID, there were many people opting out of
COVID's
these
different,
tests.
right. COVID
And
was
this
different.
would
but
have
we're not
fallen
talking
into
about
COVID.
This is this last one. I'm just talking about the last one. The COVID years weren't bad, Michelle. They were 4 and 6.
But now, okay, but don't we have to take into education that occurred during COVID years for these students? Like, so I don't think we should be looking at Algebra 1 specifically, but all curriculum specifically of things these kids have missed because they weren't in person, because things were different. I think it was a very different time. Do I think we need to put emphasis on bringing these test scores up? Certainly I do, but I don't think we need to discuss it for a half hour this evening because we're not going to resolve it.
You're okay with this?
I'm not. I just said I'm not okay with this.
Then we need to solve it. I think we need
to solve it. So I think what needs to happen now is he gave us the numbers. They are supposed to come back to us with what their recommendations are to improve. I don't think you can just wave another teacher out there and say, we need more Algebra 1 teachers. I don't think that solves your problem.
See, Michelle, I see education as 50% student and 50% the program and the teaching. Okay, I see it halfway. Not just the students, and this is just the students. But there not very many kids passed algebra out of the middle school. Michelle, I think this is so basic, such a basic responsibility. Why are we sitting here for any other reason?
So I think we have to wait for the recommendations to come back. Hopefully we will have those in the next month. I think we are also retaking Algebra 1 Keystones. That was coming up.
It was this week.
This week.
Yeah.
How many students did we have retaking them, do we know, total? Oh, okay. So
Can you report back to us how many kids coming out of middle school last year failed Algebra 1?
She said 11 passed.
11 passed Keystones.
That's what I was told. That wasn't officially.
Not 11% passed algebra. So I'd like to know how many kids we have failing algebra, because I think that's the bigger question of, are we failing our students mathematically here? Or are we not performing on a keystone? Those are two different questions.
I have another question. Did we establish a consistent grading procedure schedule throughout the district? Remember last year I got letters from the students asking that all teachers use the same grading procedures. And there were meetings with the students and meetings with faculty. Can you tell me, do we now have have we developed a consistent grading, repertoire, where it's so much homework, so much classwork, so much tests, and so forth?
No.
Are the teachers doing the same thing?
No.
And we did discuss that in one of our policy meetings, but then it never really
Not even
got
within the same building are they doing the same thing?
taken care of.
No.
I also,
But that's also-
in this discussion,
That has to
was
be
wondering if we could
thought
have
out.
the pass rate for second-time Keystone teachers.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I would like to see the pass rate for the students who are taking it the second time, that data, if you could.
I'll take a note of that. Okay. I can delineate that.
Thanks.
And the grades, the passing grades, failing grades for Algebra 1, high school and middle school.
And I can do that for all 3 of the tested areas. Okay.
Is it possible to do like what they're talking about as far as like I mean, we keep talking about children as being a percentage of whether they pass or fail some state test. That's, I mean, like, I think it's bogus, personally. But, like, imagine, like, a student who fails the Keystones but makes straight A's. Do we account for that?
That's what my question was.
I think that
Do we-
happens. I'm sure that happens.
Well, yeah, I mean,
think
it does
that's why
happen,
they offer
absolutely.
the alternative
Yeah.
pathways.
I'm just saying,
if you're
does it-
accepted to a four-year college, that's an alternative pathway to graduation if you don't pass your Keystones.
Sure, I'm not talking about like pathways or anything like that. I'm saying like, you know, like we keep saying about percentages, like this percentage is passing, but what about the percentage of the students who are passing grades? Like they have passing grades, but they're poor test takers. Do we ever take that into account when it comes to like doing like the graphs and stuff to show, or is that just based on Keystone tests?
That's just based upon the Keystone. Everybody has to. So we are required not only by state law, but by federal law that 95% of our kids take the assessments. And if we don't, we get spoken to from PDE.
Sure.
And if we don't, if a certain percentage doesn't do well, we get spoken to by PDE, correct?
Well, the state is now determining how they're going to do that post-COVID. They haven't released to the schools what that's going to look like yet, but they do take a look at how subgroups within your schools do on the assessments and whether or not some are disproportionately worse than others in your school district. So, for instance, I can speak of some time at the IU where I had to work with schools who had students who had IEPs that did not graduate at the same rate as their peers that did not have IEPs, and those schools got put on an improvement plan. However, there has been no communication from PDE on what that's going to look like now moving forward, but it will be coming out soon.
Jason, refresh my aged mind here. When people take the PSAT and the SAT, is there not a math component and a language component?
Yes, there is.
Well, doesn't this affect that?
As a math guy and as a parent, I say yes.
That's my concern. Because you could have a college-bound student who's not able to do basic algebra. You could, when you're looking at 2%.
Theoretically, yes.
Well,
Those are big,
I'll say
big-
this, as far as our, like, say, WCCC, who just our community college, like, they have their own assessments. They don't even look at SATs. They don't look at Keystones. They don't look at nothing like that.
Yeah, they'll give their own
Yeah.
placements.
And I think that's fantastic. Like, I think that's where students need to be, like, you know, to find out where they actually are going, you know. I understand this has to do with graduation and stuff, but like everybody's saying, as far as like the pathways, I think eventually I mean, what would it matter if you fail the Keystone or not if there's another pathway?
Well, that's the whole point of the pathway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody else has found a pathway so far?
Okay.
I think it's still important to discuss, like,
yeah.
These are our test scores. Is there a problem somewhere in our program? I think those are all valid things to look at because these tests are made. And I think also it would be important to compare our scores to other school districts. We can't just say, oh, this test is stupid, so it doesn't matter if our kids fail, but are we doing as good of a job as other districts in preparing our kids? And I think the data comparing our scores to other districts is more telling to say, yes or no, we're doing a good job, we're doing a bad job. We can't just say the test is.
That would have to be as far as like you would have to rate the teachers as well if you're going to compare the scores to other districts, wouldn't you? Like you'd have to rate, you'd have to get like on a teacher basis as well. Like
So-
have the same amount of teachers per this.
On maps, so like we are actually like evaluating our students against themselves to see if there's growth, to see what their knowledge is, based on the curriculum that we are teaching. So we're doing something similar at the high school, correct, and at the middle school. So we should know. Can you explain that a little bit just so everybody's aware that we are evaluating within ourselves? Can you come to the podium? I'm sorry. We can hear you, but I don't think anybody at home can.
So the MAPS testing,
You're on.
I don't know if that's on. So NWEA MAPS is a system that is used nationally. It started in Oregon about 25 or 30 years ago as a way of allowing people across the state and then more broadly than across the country to look at how we compare against other schools in our state or even nationally if we want to look at that. When we're selecting the test, we're selecting growth measures for PA because that's first and foremost. We want to make sure that we're matching up against the things that we're going to be measured against. We can also look nationally if we want to. So that was one of the reasons that we liked that because we were curious. If we wanted to know that, we would have that option. Right? We could look beyond and see how we do. In the same way that the NAEP test is given, I think if you're familiar with the NAEP test, that is a test that sometimes schools are selected for, and you're able to look at your progress against the country. So certain schools are selected every year, and you are asked to participate. So I think that what we're doing in the early stages of MAPS is we're really focused on our own growth. We haven't spent a lot of time looking at what people are doing in Poughkeepsie or anywhere else. We got to look in our own backyard first, right? But I think as we get better at it, I think that is something that component will bring to us is to see, okay, across the state, with people similarly situated, how do we perform? Across the country, how do we perform? And I'll be interested to see how that goes. So we're still really looking at ourselves first. We really haven't gone much beyond that. So giving it at the beginning of the year, and then again, how much growth have we made? How much progress have we made on the things we'll be held accountable for?
And that's occurring for the high school as well.
Yes, they're doing it as well, yes.
Is that called the same thing or it's something?
Yes, all MAPS, it's the same thing for everybody. We started with K-8. It was recommended when you do that at the high school, don't give it to 11 and 12th graders because they're tested out and that they're often not going to perform, right? They know that these are things that don't affect their grades, but in 9 and 10 that has pretty valuable stuff. So we don't give it to juniors and seniors. They've taken plenty of tests by then, and they're really, the data shows that they're not going to put a lot of effort in it, so it might not be very valid data. It may not get a lot of, if you're a senior and you're ready to get out of here and make you take a test in May, you may not really think, oh, I got to really make my best effort.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that is something we are doing to improve test scores in individual students and where they specifically need help. Are there any other questions on any of the items under education items 1 through 9? Was that all of your questions, Dr. Fike?
No, but that's okay, Michelle. You don't want to put any more time with it. We won't.
We've discussed this for over a half hour. So
Well, Michelle, what can be more important than our students learning?
if you have other questions, continue so they can be answered. I just called for more questions. If you have more, ask them.
The superintendent gave everybody this paper, and it's a 6-year comparison. So I have averaged all of these scores, and at the end, in the last 5 years, Southmoreland has lost 17% of its educational learning just in the last 5 years. That's an entire standard deviation plus 1 or 2. 17%. We've gone down. And I'm using our own data. I'm not comparing us to anybody else, just us to us. We've gone down 17%. That's putting them all together. Like I said, math was a 93% drop. But I just see it as a very serious issue. And my question is, will you give us those plans where it says the action plan for improvement?
Yeah, my intent in giving that data to the principals is that they can, I know that they are meeting with their teams of teachers. My intent was to hand them that data just to show them the trends with it, give them something to work off of with the team as they sit down, and then whenever they present to the entire board here coming up with the next couple of months, they kind of explain, okay, look, hey, we were bad in this anchor. We were really, really bad in linear equations. All right, so over the course of this year, here's what we've done so far to talk about linear equations. My intent was, I really highlighted our performance on open-ended questioning because the only way you get better at open-ended questioning is if you keep working at it and get exposed to it. So I guess my intent would be when they present to the board later, like, listen, here's what we've done with open-ended questioning over the past 6 months in order to get our students ready for that. And if we haven't done that, then that's a bigger issue. But I will say that the open-ended questioning, by and large, is the biggest issue with Algebra 1. If you're looking at the scores, that is how you bring it up.
That's how you do it, yeah. This is an excellent document, and I looked at the overall, I think, as far as I can tell, in the state of Pennsylvania, out of 100, we rank number 30. We're 38 from the bottom. We're like 62 lower in the state. It's okay. Let's move on, Michelle.
Do you have more questions?
No.
I mean, first of all, it's not okay to say that I'm ignoring your questions when I'm asking anybody here if there are more questions. I never said, does anybody but Dr. Fike have questions?
Right.
If you do, I mean, and I want to say this too. I think you having that document of data in December is far better than when you got the document that you requested last year, which was well towards the end of the year with no room to improve anything because nobody looked at those numbers. I think we are in a much better place in January of 2023 than we were in January of 2022. And all we can do is continue to look forward and what we can do to improve. I think we have put things in place to try to help us to improve. Do we still have a lot of work to do? Certainly we do. Do I think those scores are important? Certainly I do. Everybody sitting at this table does, or they wouldn't be here. If you have more questions, when I call for questions, it's the time to ask them. If there's more, ask them.
I would like to add too, that we are all still, our students, I mean, our seniors, our juniors right now are just coming off of like 2 years worth of half and half schooling, in-service school, at-home schooling, so we have to understand that there's residual to all of that, and they're still adapting as well. And I think, these test scores, they're going to probably reflect badly because, I mean, in the last, 2-3 years now, there hasn't been consistent 180 days worth of schooling to, stay on top of that. And that's hard for teachers to stay on top of students who are at home, and it's hard for teachers to teach while students are at home. That was frustrating enough. So I think give it another probably 2-3 years and we'll see some big improvements. We really will, but it takes time. You can't just improve overnight,
I agree with you 100% on what you said, Nicole. I just think that we need to keep in mind that the data we got was over the last 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So that's something to just remember, so there are some issues that we need to continue to, I don't think it's all COVID related. I think that there's some,
sure.
Some of them are 6 and 7.
I'm saying more probably the testing that's coming out now, we're going to still see that residual of the effects of COVID.
I think we're seeing it in a lot of areas.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Does anybody else have any questions on the education section?
Just a point of clarification, last year there were 40 students out of 8th grade in Algebra 1 that passed. I think the year prior there were 11.
Okay, that's good. Like I said, that was just a number I had heard, so
Yeah.
it wasn't an official hearing from you.
Okay.
Next section would be finance.
Okay. I have 10 items under finance. Item number 1, monthly board treasurer's report. Item number 2, general fund board summary report. Number 3, accounting and food service check summary. Number 4, awarding of bids diesel fuel. Number 5, awarding of bids unleaded gasoline. Number 6, Westmoreland Intermediate Unit joint purchasing 2023-2024, permission to advertise. Number 7, joint purchasing consortium representatives. Number 8, Act 1. Number 9, Building Activity Fund, information for informational purposes only. And number 10, Cyber Charter expense analysis for informational purposes only. Does anybody have any questions on items number 1 through 10?
I have a question about the joint purchasing agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, if you look at those, and I read them 5 times, tell me if it's been changed. It said, we're going to buy diesel fuel for 3.5 something, and the next one says we're going to buy diesel fuel for 3.07. If you go back and you find the original contracts, the second one says 87 octane. But on our agenda, it says diesel fuel twice at 2 different prices. But the contracts are correct. Probably correct.
I see one that says gasoline from Petroleum Traders from January through June for gasoline 87 octane at a fixed rate of 3.07 per gallon. And I see,
Are you reading from the agenda or from the contracts?
I'm reading from the contract.
Yeah, the contracts are correct, Pam. The agenda is where it says we're buying
the
diesel fuel
agenda is where
twice.
it's incorrect.
Isn't it?
No.
87 octane and then.
Diesel fuel and then
Those are
unleaded gas.
those are the contracts. Go to the agenda.
That is the agenda. This
No.
is the agenda on the left. The contracts I have to go over here, but here it says number 4, diesel fuel, number 5.
Yeah, okay, pull up diesel fuel.
Unleaded gas.
Pull them up, pull them up. That's where the mistake is, and I think it's just an error.
We have to fill something in on that.
It's Kate, it says
joint
diesel fuel,
purchasing
3.5.
consortium
Now keep going.
representative.
To the second
no
page.
names.
No, the second page.
I don't
Or
have
Or
the
the first page then, go back
Okay,
to the first
okay.
page.
That's what it is.
And then go to this one?
Here by name.
I read
on
it
the
5
voting.
times.
Yes.
I think it's just a mistake. We shouldn't vote on a mistake.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have found where the mistake is. It's actually not in this meeting, it's in the next meeting. It's in the voting meeting.
Oh, it's
It's typed out on the agenda,
That's fine.
and
It's an
it's
easy
typed out
correction.
as diesel fuel. Is that a change that we can make in a motion? We can just edit that motion to be,
Scroll up a little bit too. We have
Yes.
to put a name in on this document. That document you were just on.
Sorry.
Yes, I'm looking.
Michelle, it's just a simple mistake. I just corrected on
Just an
the
omission, that's
agenda.
Maybe it's on the voting
for that
meeting.
information. For you to keep the document. But just
Oh, is it on-
Board of School Directors of the blank.
Okay, because there are actually,
I believe in the voting meeting in the motion, it says who those people are.
I'd like to be part of
Right.
the
We get to
diesel
vote
agreement.
meeting,
Right.
List those people out.
Right.
I thought I had done.
And
I
that will
think
give
I
us
was
the
crazy.
authority to move forward with the contract and to fill in
It's on the
any
voting
omitted
meeting.
information.
I didn't think I was crazy. I was like, but I did it before.
okay, so we're all okay with that?
Yeah.
That actually occurs in the next meeting, and we'll have to
Said exactly.
fix that through a motion. Are there any other comments or discussion under the finance section?
I had one, but I can't find it now.
As far as the Act 1,
Right.
I thought I had it.
are we planning to vote whether to eliminate that Act 1 or
No. You're voting to take away the ability to go over the Act 1 index.
Gotcha.
She is not making a recommendation to
That's
go over
that's
the
why
Act.
she's looking.
Okay, I was just a little
Discussion.
Right.
Or-
Yes.
confused on, so I want to make sure I'm voting correctly.
So you're basically eliminating the right to be able to go over the Act 1. And that is her recommendation, is not to vote to go over Act 1.
So I see this differently. I see voting for Act 1 is telling the public that we now have permission to go up to what, 4.7 mils, Pam?
Correct, but we're not going over 4.7. That's what the vote has to be right now. We have a deadline of when
You
we
should,
can do
it
that.
should be, it should say on there, we're not going to raise taxes, period. I'm not voting for permission to raise people's taxes. That's wrong.
But that, I don't think
not what we're
that's
voting
what that.
I know what they're after. I know what they're after, but this actually gives us permission to raise taxes up to
already have permission to do
4.7.
that.
Well, this is official. This is official. Nobody goes over the act.
We already have
Nobody.
permission to
Nobody.
go up to the, we don't need permission to go up to that. We already have it.
Then why do you need
We're
this?
telling the voters that we're
That
not
we're not
going to
going
ask
over.
for permission to go over.
We never have. Nobody does.
But we still have to
Technically have
do
the authority
this.
to go up to the Act 1 index.
Makes you do
We
that.
have to do this. This
But
is a
by law, you
requirement.
have to do this.
By school code, we have to do it by a certain date, correct?
This is so wrong.
That's an argument for Harrisburg.
That's right.
So
That
go
is an
there
argument for Harrisburg.
And argue, please.
When you believe me, I do. I know these people on a
I
first-name
can't-
basis.
I can't fix this. This is required by law. And it's basically saying that we're not going over. We're not asking for the right to go over.
But you're saying that this allows you to go up to 4.7 mils.
I'm not voting to allow that. The state has already voted to allow that. Nobody here is voting to allow you to go up to that. The state gave you a piece of paper in an email and said, this is what you can go up to.
Well, the public needs to know that this vote allows these taxes to go up to 4.7 mils should this board choose. That's what this means.
That's not what that means.
That's not what this vote is.
It can't go to 4.8, but it can go to 4.7.
Right.
Okay?
But that's not what this vote
Right,
is.
that's what the state has said that it can go to and gives us the
The right to do
The
that if we
boundary
need
to do so,
to balance
if we
the
need
budget.
that.
Does anybody else have any questions on anything under finance? Bill,
That's okay. Next section is building and grounds, and there are no items. And the following section will be athletics and activities where there are no items.
are there any citizens' comments in regards to the discussion meeting? The discussion meeting, if you have comments, you can make them now. That's fine. Now would be the time.
Scott Olson from TARS. I have a question for the board, but before I do that, I'm going to bore you with a few facts. If you don't, you just bear with me.
Can you, just 1 second, I want you to know that you have 3 minutes.
I won't take out.
Okay.
I promise.
I just wanted you to know
It won't
so
take
that,
that long. I'm going to present the facts, and you're going to answer a question, and that'll determine where I go in the future. The Kaiser Family Foundation collected data from selected people that led to masks required for children. That was backed up by Bill and Linda Gates. There was no science to this. CDC has admitted their data on children affected by COVID was way overinflated. Dr. Peter McDonald has determined that the vaccine has hurt more people than it's helped. England is pulling the vaccine requirements. Denmark is stating no child should receive the vaccine. The Kaiser family is now waning on their support of the vaccine. The FDA wanted to hold the adverse effects report for 75 years, which that's not happening. Data showed 71% of the people who die in bed within 2 weeks of receiving vaccine is attributed to the vaccine. There's a 4,000% increase in births and miscarriages, according to Dr. James Thorpe. 80% of Americans are saying no more vaccine. I know from the November board meeting there was a concern about the money that's going to cyber schools. I think maybe you brought it up, Dr. Fike, somebody did. My question is, what is the school board's position since our new governor is going to be pushing for masks and vaccines? What does our board think of this? Because my concern is, I know myself personally, if masks and vaccines are required, my children will be going to cyber school or somewhere else. So I don't know if the board's given any consideration to this at all yet. It's been something that's been concerning me for a good while. I have one son that went to cyber school. It's a very good program. I'm not encouraging it for everybody, but I want to know, have you given any thought about what you're going to do if he in fact says you shall wear masks and you shall vaccine before allowing attendance? Has anyone considered that yet?
It's a good question.
so just so you know, this isn't a question and answer session. So,
okay,
but I will tell you that nothing has come from PDE that is going to require that. I have not even really heard any discussion of that.
I know Philly's pushing for it.
Philadelphia has reinstated masking.
So that's that is not something that have you heard or seen or read anything about that? No. So that's not been discussed at the board level. The decision was made to move forward without masking. The vaccine is not a requirement according to PDE. That will remain that way until PDE says that something has to change.
Okay.
Those are all not rules that we invented here in Southmoreland.
I understand that, but I mean, some people, you can stand up for some things too. You can hold a line, and I didn't know where you stood on that.
Sadly, public school doesn't have as much.
Well, and
I
think there's a concern because the people I've talked to will pull their children if that's required.
And I understand that. But that was not a Southmoreland. That was a policy that Southmoreland was made to adhere to, as there are many policies in public education that we're made to adhere to. But I understand your concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Jan Kiefer. So the policies that you're made to adhere to. There's no substitute for local. There's no substitute for local leadership, and whenever authority endorses your PDE or whatever, and they've been shown they've been wrong to the tune of serious historical an extent, when do you stop saying this is what the PDE says or what the American Pediatrics says or what Anthony Fauci says, when the record has been so dismal? And have you engaged the information that would suggest that? If you can see me after the meeting and say, yeah, I can tell you the backstory of the PDE and Pennsylvania Department of Health, and this dictates that you guys have been following to disastrous extents, then I'll say, yeah, you really have engaged in that material. I'm willing to bet serious money that you haven't engaged in that, because I could tell, I'm not going to say why, I would just bet that you haven't. So yeah, this isn't a place where you answer questions. A place you answer questions is when you engage with the community and the committees that should be functioning, and you put these representatives here, these local leaders, on the spot, and I ask you the question in front of the camera, and you can't just sit there. I would go down the line. I'd say, tell me you've engaged the information that's antithetical to what policy you're engaging, and tell me why you can't stand up for your individual beliefs and say, we as a school board may have to follow the state dictates, but we are making a proclamation that we are not going to put vaccination in our, or we're going to take the vaccination out. The last I looked, the vaccination wasn't part of your re-entry for students. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Correct me if you haven't done anything on ventilation, which is the one good thing that we've learned from the COVID scenario, or the COVID story, is that ventilation improves things.
Can I say something real quick? Just
Sure.
for one thing that you said there, why can't we stand up for our individual rights on the board here? I don't actually believe I have an individual right on this board. I think that we have been elected to represent the whole community. I think that if I made decisions based on what I wanted to happen specifically, that would be the wrong thing to do. I think that I always have to look at what's best for the entire community of students.
Okay, I'll work on that and respond to that in another time. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other citizens' comments? I need a motion to adjourn, and could we take a 5-minute recess in between meetings? We will be coming back for the voting meeting. I am going to let the admin team leave. If there are any questions of them before they go. They are only required to be at one meeting a month, and since we're holding them both simultaneously, I think they can leave.
Motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.